Imagine watching your hungry cattle pace the fence line while some pretend security guard blocks your ranch gate, grinning as she makes a 73-year-old man slog through mud just to reach his herd. That's exactly what Brenda Kowalski pulled on. Ezra Hendress, this fake HOA enforcer, parked her oversized F-250 across his family ranch entrance every single morning, clipboard waving, bogus badge flashing, acting like she controlled land his family's held since 1952. She'd sit there for hours, engine running, air on full blast, watching this elderly rancher struggle to feed animals going hungry thanks to her little power trip. But here's what Brenda had no clue about. Ezra spent 40 years re-railing freight cars weighing 200 tons. And he's got chains, a winch, and the patience of a man who's had enough. What would you do if some bully with a phony badge tried starving your stock? Tell me in the comments where you're watching and share your worst HOA nightmare. Ezra inherited Thunder Creek Ranch from his dad, a Korean War vet who bought these acres with GI Bill money back in 1952, back when the land sat in the middle of nowhere. Texas prairie, where the biggest event was thunderstorms rolling over the horizon, until Willowbrook subdivision popped up around him like weeds after heavy rain. Walk on to Ezra's ground on a summer morning, and you'll catch 3 generations of work. Old saddles hanging in the barn, hay dust in sunbeams, and that crisp tang of well water pumped from 300 feet down. The cedar posts still smell of creosote, from when his father set them, each board carrying a history of storms endured and seasons survived. This is where he raised 2 kids after his wife Martha passed, sent them both through college on cattle money, and now keeps 30 Angus with his granddaughter Sage, 22, sharp as a tack, studying pre-law at UT Austin and spending summers learning that real legal lessons come from watching how ordinary people solve hard problems. 5 years ago, developers split up the prairie into subdivisions with fancy names like Tuscany Estates and Heritage Oaks, because apparently every Texas suburb has to sound like wine country, and the newcomers formed the Willowbrook HOA almost overnight, electing Brenda as their self-styled rules enforcer. Brenda's a 45-year-old divorced realtor who moved down from Ohio after her marriage collapsed, drives a lifted F-250 with vanity plates Harrell 8R, and carries herself like she's got real authority instead of a laminate badge printed at FedEx. Her diesel roars like a chainsaw and she guns it just to make noise, the burnt exhaust mixing with prairie grass like a deliberate insult. Then she turns nasty, blocking Ezra's gate daily at 7 sharp. Claiming his ranch violates community standards, snapping photos, writing fake citations on official-looking forms, and threatening court. From her real estate background, she knows most elderly landowners can't afford even bogus lawsuits, a calculated plan to push them into compliance or out of business. But here's the part that'll boil your blood. Ezra's land was never in the HOA. His property predates the subdivision by 70 years. With deeds going back to Eisenhower's presidency, but Brenda's betting he's too old, too broke, or too weary to fight. When Ezra calmly says he never signed HOA contracts, Brenda just laughs. We'll see about that, old man. This neighborhood has rules now, and you're following them whether you like it or not. I've got friends at City Hall who know more law than some rancher. Her truck door slam echoes like a gunshot across the field, spooking cattle and driving them toward the fence. But Ezra just watches her leave, remembering what his railroad boss once said. The worst wrecks come when someone ignores the warnings. What Brenda didn't see was that she'd just picked a fight with a man who solved problems with physics, leverage, and the patience that kept trains on time. And Ezra also knew in property fights, records beat threats every single time, a lesson that would pay off soon. That night, with the timbers creaking and cattle grazing the same pasture 3 generations have known, Ezra looks out the window ready to show her what happens when you misjudge a man who's put locomotives back on rails. Monday morning, 7 a.m. sharp, Brenda's back, not just blocking the gate, but hauling folding chairs and a cooler, turning the property line into her own tailgate, camping like she owned the ground, letting her diesel idle 20 minutes, filling his pasture with black smoke before shutting it down. The impact is immediate. Ezra can't get feed through to the back pasture where his pregnant cows are waiting, animals used to the same routine for years now massing at the gate, lowing with hunger like a choir of protest. Sage has to leave her beat-up Honda half a mile away and trek through wet grass just to help, the dew soaking her jeans so she arrives looking like she swam through a field. "This is insane, Grandpa," she mutters, yanking burrs from her socks. "She can't just sit here like some suburban warlord." But Brenda only grows bolder, waving at Ezra like they're friendly neighbors. "Morning, Mr. Hendris. Just noting concerns about agricultural odors hurting property values, you know, community standards and all that." What cuts deepest is how she says agricultural odors like it's toxic sludge when it's really dirt, hay, and cattle, the very scents that built Texas. Then comes the twist that changes everything. Sage finds out Brenda has been filing police reports claiming Ezra threatened her whenever he asked her to move, real reports with case numbers. Deputy Martinez, who's known Ezra forever, quietly warns him at the feed store. "Ezra, she's building a record. 3 complaints. Already. Harassment, verbal threats. I know it's garbage, but in court, she'll have papers. You'll just have your word." That night, with the smell of Martha's old coffee pot filling the house, Ezra begins his own record-keeping, snapping photos, noting details, and writing Brenda's exact words, because his railroad days taught him the line between minor delay and disaster is accurate documentation. Sage brings her laptop, digging through county records that reach back to territorial days, and there she uncovers something important. Texas landowners can request a county survey verification to officially confirm property boundaries, and while it costs around $300, it produces legal documentation admissible in court, the kind of hard evidence that ends disputes before they escalate. "We need to think like lawyers, not ranchers," Sage tells her grandfather, pulling up deed records showing exact boundary lines drawn with surveyor accuracy. "She's playing a legal game, so we beat her at her own rules." But Brenda refuses to slow down. Instead, she recruits 2 other HOA board members to reinforce her campaign, and suddenly the harassment has backup. Now, 3 pickup trucks line different stretches of Ezra's fence, their drivers pretending they're conducting official inspections when they're really running a coordinated intimidation act. Neighbors start taking sides, and tensions climb. Some subdivision families side with Brenda because they moved to escape the sight and smell of ranch life, preferring manicured lawns to grazing cattle, while others whisper that she's unhinged but keep quiet for fear of her HOA citations over things as small as mailbox size or grass height. Ezra's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Olivia, a Vietnamese gardener known for the best tomatoes in the county, arrives with a basket of produce and quiet wisdom. "In my country, we say, the loudest duck is the one shot first. That woman is very loud duck." Standing in his barn that night, running calloused hands along the heavy chains that once dragged derailed freight cars back on track, Ezra makes his choice. If Brenda wants to play the documentation game, he'll bury her in real evidence instead of forged complaints. The air smells of leather and oil as he checks his tractor's winch, just maintenance on the surface. But deep down, he's preparing for a fight that won't end with paperwork alone. By Thursday, Brenda has perfected her routine, enlisting Dale Hutchkins, a retired insurance adjuster with endless spare time, and Karen Fitzgerald, a realtor who sees nothing but profit in empty land. Their 3 trucks now circle Ezra's property, like a rolling barricade, coordinating through a WhatsApp chat they call Ranch Patrol, posturing like some kind of small-town militia. The harassment shifts into organized psychological warfare. They appear unpredictably. Early morning when Ezra feeds cattle, midday when hay deliveries arrive, late evening when he corrals animals, forcing him to treat every chore like a military operation. Business starts to suffer fast. His hay supplier, old Buck Williams, sick of hiking bales across the county road, apologizes but refuses to keep working around some crazy woman's blockade. Even Dr. Sarah Olivia, the veterinarian, who's treated his herd for over 15 years, faces delays during an emergency when a pregnant cow shows distress. Forced to abandon her truck, she races on foot with only what equipment she can carry. Though the calf survives, the lost time rattles her, and afterward she warns Ezra bluntly, "This is harming your herd. Stressed cattle don't breed right, gain weight, or produce milk. Keep this up and you're staring at real losses." Then Sage uncovers a bombshell. Digging through Brenda's old Ohio real estate listings, she finds promotional material where Brenda brags to buyers that Thunder Creek Ranch is only temporary agricultural use, destined for retail development within 2 years. "Grandpa, look at this!" she gasps, laptop glowing in the lamplight. "She's literally selling houses by promising your ranch is going away." Worse, Brenda spreads lies around the subdivision, claiming his herd spreads disease, poisons groundwater, and violates health codes, systematically destroying his reputation. That's when Jake Morrison enters, a property attorney who grew up on a ranch 40 miles south before moving into law. His office smells of coffee and leather-bound books, and when Sage lays out their case, his professional focus turns to personal outrage. "This isn't just harassment," he says firmly. "This is conspiracy to interfere with business, maybe even fraud if she's lying to boost sales." The problem is cost. Harassment suits take at least 18 months and require $15,000 up front. Money Ezra doesn't have after Martha's medical bills drained their savings. But Morrison offers a different path, one built for Ezra's strengths. In Texas, blocking access to private land for over 30 minutes counts as criminal trespass, he explains, flipping through a handbook thick as a brick. The trick is proving it with solid evidence and getting law enforcement to act. Ezra begins timing Brenda's visits down to the second with his old railroad pocket watch that hasn't missed in 40 years, while he hides a trail camera disguised as a fence post to capture plates, faces, and durations. Sage digitizes everything, building a social media campaign that spreads past their community. Her posts about an elderly rancher bullied by fake HOA authority are picked up by rural property rights groups statewide, and suddenly Ezra's story resonates with dozens of landowners who've fought similar battles. As storm clouds gather over the prairie and the scent of rain drifts across the fields, Mrs. Olivia stops by again with another basket of tomatoes and more wisdom that cuts straight to the heart. "That woman thinks she's clever," Ezra mused, watching her antics unfold in the subdivision, "but truly smart folks know when to stop. She doesn't, because she's crossed into obsession." Late that night in his barn, while checking the hydraulics, on his old tractor and testing the PTO winch, his hands ran along 200 feet of heavy railroad chain, the kind used to drag derailed freight cars back onto the tracks, 5 pounds per link, strong enough to move anything that dared stand in his way. He figured tomorrow would be a fine day to make sure every piece of his equipment ran smooth, because Brenda had escalated her war to the next level, bureaucratic strangulation. Week 3 brought her flood of government complaints, health code, violations, environmental hazards, even calls to the agriculture department, all designed to bury him in inspections and fees. By Monday, a health officer measured distances around his cattle pens, charging him $200 despite Ezra passing every requirement. Tuesday came with an EPA agent testing his water, finding it cleaner than most city taps, but still billing him another fee. Wednesday dragged a rookie agricultural inspector through ankle-deep mud in a thunderstorm. She quietly admitted she knew he was being harassed but had no choice but to file reports. Meanwhile, Brenda fueled rumors online that Ezra was senile, unsafe with machinery, and financially incompetent, whispering poison about guardianship and competency hearings. The strain mounted. Inspection fees, lost income, and stressed cattle. Herding production pushed him toward selling 2 beloved breeding cows, a thought that cut him deeply. Then Deputy Martinez warned him Brenda was digging into his military history and finances, clearly fishing for leverage. The neighborhood split like a fault line, some siding with her claims about property values, others silently backing Ezra, but too afraid to be her next target. That's when Sage unearthed a game changer at the UT Law Library. Brenda had never registered as a legitimate HOA management company, meaning her so-called enforcement carried no legal weight. In Texas, that failure wasn't just sloppy, it was a misdemeanor punishable by fines and jail, and everything she'd done amounted to fraud. Ezra didn't lash out. Instead, he leaned into quiet acts of kindness, mending a neighbor's storm-damaged fence, sharing hay with struggling families, and clearing fallen trees after bad weather, building credibility that painted him as the steady neighbor Brenda couldn't discredit. Meanwhile, the chains he stored in his barn waited like iron insurance, a reminder of solving problems with leverage instead of paperwork. Then Sage struck gold in the county courthouse. Brenda was months behind on her own property taxes, her house sliding toward foreclosure, her HOA business drowning in $12,000 of unpaid fees, and she'd been siphoning community money into personal expenses. Classic embezzlement. Digging deeper, Sage uncovered emails tying her to Millennium Properties, a Dallas developer dangling finder's fees for land acquisitions, with Ezra's groundwater rights being the crown jewel. The documents revealed a predatory strategy of harassment, financial stress, and intimidation to force rural owners into distressed sales. Even worse, Sage found that Brenda's official-looking credentials were forged on her home printer with Word templates, making every fine and citation worthless. Finally, Deputy Martinez confirmed what they suspected. Brenda wasn't just power-hungry, she was desperate, reckless, and willing to conspire with developers to strip Ezra of his land, by any means necessary. Brenda's campaign against Ezra reached a sinister new level as she pressured the sheriff's department to arrest him on fabricated agricultural violations, probed civil forfeiture laws, and repeatedly asked about competency hearings to strip him of control over his land. Deputy Martinez confided to Sage that Brenda's obsession wasn't just harassment, it bordered on conspiracy, especially once public records tied her to Millennium Properties, a development company with a documented history of targeting ranches with valuable water rights using the same blueprint of harassment, fake officials, and financial sabotage. What Ezra faced was organized crime disguised as community management, and the realization galvanized him. This fight was no longer about one ranch, but every small landowner in Texas. His kitchen table became a war room where maps, deeds, and Sage's legal research spread like a battle plan, soon joined by other victims, Linda the horse trainer, Big Jim the hay farmer, the Kowalski retirees, and Vietnam vet Tom Rodriguez, each telling eerily similar stories of fraudulent citations and intimidation. Jake Morrison, their attorney, mapped a counteroffensive of fraud charges, conspiracy lawsuits, and injunctions, explaining that Brenda's fake authority was a federal crime punishable by prison. Evidence grew to over 200 incidents, and with Martinez timing patrols to catch violations and Sage coordinating documentation, they built an airtight case while rallying community support. Emma Rodriguez, an investigative journalist, recognized the broader land theft pattern and began preparing a story that could blow the scheme wide open. Ezra's neighbors, long cowed into silence, started standing up after a ranch barbecue, admitting their fear of Brenda but drawing courage from Ezra's defiance. Drawing on his railroad days, Ezra planned tactical but legal property modifications, from cattle guards to a chain and tractor system that could remove trespassing vehicles without damage. When Brenda escalated with a false restraining order, doctored evidence, and eventually hired Muscle, who shoved Ezra on his own property, Sage's video evidence turned her aggression into liability. Brenda doubled down with IRS complaints, health scare rumors, and social media fear-mongering. But the discovery of Millennium's shopping center plans for land they didn't yet own was the smoking gun tying her harassment to corporate theft. The breaking point came when Brenda staged a blockade at Ezra's gate, only to have him calmly hook her F-250 with logging chain and drag it sideways into a muddy creek bank, immobilized but undamaged, while Deputy Martinez affirmed the legality of his action. Neighbors and media witnessed her humiliation, and Sage's viral video of fake HOA cop schooled by 73-year-old rancher spread nationwide. Within hours, Brenda's allies abandoned her. Morrison arrived with arrest warrants, and deputies cuffed her for fraud, impersonation, conspiracy, and harassment. The search of her records revealed the full scope of Millennium's scheme, triggering federal racketeering scrutiny. That night, instead of Brenda's planned triumph, the HOA meeting became her public undoing. With Margaret Torres taking charge, residents one by one confessed how they too had been bullied, overcharged, or threatened into compliance. Ezra walked into applause, no longer a besieged rancher but the symbol of resistance, proving that sometimes when land, dignity, and truth are threatened, an old man with chains and grit can derail an empire. The financial records revealed a bombshell, over $23,000 in suspicious expenditures and missing funds that should have gone toward improving neighborhood amenities, but instead wound up in Brenda's personal accounts and funneled to her partners in crime. "We've been robbed," Margaret declared, her teacher's voice cutting through the shocked murmurs. "Not just of money, but of our trust, our unity, and the respect that binds neighbors together. That ends here and now." Then Jake Morrison stepped to the podium with the steady poise of a seasoned litigator, presenting the entire conspiracy like a prosecutor's closing statement. Charts behind him laid bare Millennium Properties' development timeline, and Morrison explained how this was never about property values. It was an orchestrated plan to strip Mr. Hendricks of his land through harassment and fraud. He showed how the very same methods had been used in 3 other states, always aimed at elderly or financially struggling owners. Deputy Martinez followed, his precise delivery giving the crowd a lawman's perspective. He explained how Brenda's forged documents, bogus reports, and organized network of paid accomplices added up to a string of felonies under both Texas and federal law. "This isn't a neighborhood dispute," Martinez declared, his badge gleaming under the lights. "This is organized crime disguised as an HOA." He then confirmed Brenda could face up to 15 years in federal prison, with her fellow conspirators already being rounded up across state lines. That set the stage for the defining moment of the evening. Ezra approached the microphone slowly, his years of carrying railroad timetables teaching him the power of timing. The room went utterly silent. Adjusting the mic, he scanned the faces before him, supporters and skeptics alike. "I didn't drag that truck into the creek because I lost my temper," he began, his voice steady but strong. "Though believe me, I was angry. I did it because bullies only understand one thing: being shown they picked the wrong target. This was never about revenge. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did." The room erupted in thunderous applause that shook the walls, captured on dozens of live streams spreading across Texas. Emma Rodriguez recorded every second for her feature story, but it was the residents' real-time broadcasts that turned the meeting into a statewide event. Margaret called the vote, and the results were overwhelming. Fire the corrupt HOA management, refund every illegally charged fee, adopt bylaws protecting agricultural property, and enforce strict financial transparency, moving forward. Then came the emotional climax. Mrs. Olivia presented Ezra with a quilt stitched together by every family in the subdivision, embroidered with the words, "Thank you for standing up for us all." For the first time in decades, Ezra cried in front of his neighbors, the applause rolling on for minutes. Justice, at long last, was theirs. 3 months later, Willowbrook was unrecognizable. The bitter divide had given way to unity, with neighbors pitching in to mend Ezra's fences and repair the damage caused by Brenda's schemes. The rural versus suburban feud had transformed into genuine cooperation. Brenda, meanwhile, pled guilty to federal conspiracy and received 8 years in prison along with full restitution. Millennium Properties was hit with $2.3 million in fines, stripped of its Texas license, and banned from ever doing business in the state again. The collapse of their development scam safeguarding dozens of farms and ranches. The healing was both financial and deeply personal. Residents raised $15,000 to replace the calf lost during Brenda's blockade and began volunteering on Ezra's ranch, forming bonds over shared work. Children who once feared the old rancher now flocked to his land to ride horses and learn about cattle. Sage's law career took off with purpose as she partnered with Morrison to launch the Texas Rural Property Defense Fund, offering free legal aid to families targeted by predatory developers. Within a year, they'd already defended 12 families without a single loss. Ezra, with restitution funds, created the Thunder Creek Agricultural Scholarship, the first award going to Maria Santos, whose family dairy had faced the same predatory pressure until Ezra's battle exposed the scam. Ezra ensured his ranch would never fall to developers by placing it under a permanent conservation easement, inspiring 3 other families to protect more than 200 acres of farmland. The community's annual barbecue evolved into the Thunder Creek Heritage Festival, drawing families from multiple counties to celebrate farming traditions, local food, and the unity between ranchers and suburban neighbors. Emma Rodriguez's reporting won a state journalism award and helped push through the Property Owner Protection Act, making it a felony to impersonate officials for land grabs. Deputy Martinez was promoted to detective, specializing in rural property crimes, crediting the case with teaching him that real policing requires context, not just code enforcement. Even Ezra's railroad ingenuity became a legacy. His method of moving Brenda's truck without damage became a case study in engineering programs. On a personal level, his friendship with Mrs. Olivia grew deep, her help with ranch paperwork matched by his lessons to her granddaughter in horseback riding. Financial stability allowed him to grow his herd to 45 head of cattle and start a weekend agritourism program where subdivision kids experienced ranch life firsthand. Every evening, he kept Martha's photo by his kitchen table, next to the binder of deeds and legal filings that saved his land. A quiet reminder that love and justice often require the same fierce resolve. What began as one old rancher protecting his family's property had blossomed into sweeping change, stronger laws, empowered communities, and a model of resistance spreading to other states. That's how a 73-year-old retired railman, armed with a tractor and some chains, dismantled a multi-million-dollar fraud and preserved his legacy. So let me ask you, have you ever faced a so-called authority trying to take what was rightfully yours? And if Ezra's fight inspired you, make sure you're subscribed, because next week I'll tell you the story of the small-town librarian who outsmarted the IRS using nothing but determination and a century-old legal loophole they forgot existed. Another day, another HOA showdown wrapped. If this one made you cheer or shake your head in disbelief, hit like, share your own experience in the comments, and stay tuned for the next battle in the BBS.